Department Awards Ceremony for the year 2019. On behalf of the Westland Police Department Awards Committee, which consists of Sergeant Krapodra, Officer Paris, Officer Jennifer Schurig, and myself, Lieutenant Wilkie. I want to thank everyone for attending tonight's ceremony to honor the brave men and women of the Westland Police Department. 2019 marked the first year that officer body-worn cameras were in use for the entire year. The results were not surprising to any of us. The use of body cameras did not result in catching officers who were constantly doing wrong. Rather, they recorded officers doing many things not only right, but above and beyond. Though this has been a positive for the department, it proved to be somewhat of an issue for the awards committee. The committee thought that it had been difficult to sort through and choose awards in years past, but the body cameras have made determining which acts are to be included in tonight's ceremony harder than ever. Though this was difficult, the awards ceremony committee is honored to be able to recognize the hardworking members of the Westland Police Department. This presentation includes only a small portion what could have been deemed as award-worthy actions by officers of this department in 2019. There are 2 points that I have spoken of at past awards ceremonies that bear repeating. First, as you watch the videos that are included in tonight's presentations, I ask that you recognize the emotions that are provoked within you as you watch. Do they cause you excitement, fear, anxiety, or maybe even panic? The officers you see were most likely experiencing some of the same emotions, but to a much greater degree. Despite this high degree of stressful emotion, these officers were able to overcome and do what needed to be done, putting their emotions on hold until the job was done. Second, I want to thank everyone who came out here to show honor and respect to these Westland police officers earning awards tonight. From family to friends to co-workers to public officials, there's nothing more important to police work than your support. With all of you standing beside us and supporting us, we would not be able to serve this community effectively. We ask that you understand how important your role is, and in turn, how important it is to our entire community. Thank you for that. And for that, the Westland Police Department applauds all of you. Thank you. At this time, I would like to invite Faith and Shane Kozak to the front of the stage to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And I would ask that we all stand as the Westland Police Department Honor Guard performs the presentation of the colors.
Ready? Oh. Colors right. Mark. Post colors. Post. Ready? And. Present arms.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, in liberty and justice for all.
Order. Arms. Left. Face. Forward. March.
Thank you, Faith and Shane Kozak, for your help with the Pledge of Allegiance, and thank you to the Westland Police Honor Guard. They did an excellent job as always. Without further delay, I would like to introduce the many dignitaries who came out to help us recognize these award recipients tonight. If we could please hold our applause until the end, we could recognize them all at one time. First off, from the Police and Fire Civil Service Commission, we have Representative Grant Allen, wherever he is. Thank you. Also from the Police and Fire Civil Service Commission, Bishop Luke McClendon. Wayne County Undersheriff and retired Police Chief Dan Faunus. Wayne County Commissioner Glenn Anderson. City Clerk Richard LeBlanc. City Council Member James Godbout. I would also like to mention that there are many other City Council members that could not be here but sent their regards due to a training conference that they had to attend. We have 18th District Court Judge Mark McConnell, 18th District Court Judge Sandra Cicerelli, and from State of Michigan Representative Kevin Coleman. Finally, unfortunately, Deputy Mayor Reddy and Mayor Weil were unable to attend tonight due to illness, but they send their regards. So for everybody, could we please give them a round of applause for coming and showing up tonight? Thank you. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive right into the awards ceremony. So first off, Officer Soulier. If Officer Soulier is here, can you please come up to the stage? On March 1st, 2019, officers were dispatched to an injured, intoxicated man who had fallen in the basement of his home and had threatened to cause harm to himself and others. Officer Soulier accompanied the Westland Fire Department into the basement where the subject was located and attempted to provide him medical care. However, a fully loaded revolver was located on the couch, partially covered by a blanket and directly next to the subject. When the subject realized the gun was seen by emergency personnel, he immediately armed himself with the gun and began threatening to end his own life. Fire units retreated, but Officer Soulier risked his own safety in order to make sure that the man did not harm himself. Utilizing his de-escalation training, Officer Soulier was able to keep the subject calm. Officer Soulier maintained conversation with the subject, furthering the rapport that he had established, until he was eventually able to convince the subject to put the officer down. Officer Soulier secured the scene, enabling rescue personnel to deliver the medical attention to the man that he so badly needed. Because of his patience and the time Officer Soulier spent with this subject, a tragedy was surely avoided. Because of his actions on this day, Officer Soulier is going to be awarded the Westland Police Department Certificate of Merit. All right, next I would like to invite up Officer Gomez and Officer Pettit, please. On April 17th, 2019, Officers Gomez and Pettit were dispatched to a possible fire at the Park Crest Apartments. Police units are dispatched in conjunction with the fire department to assist with evacuating the large number of people who reside in the multiple unit building. Despite the building's smoke and quickly lessening visibility, officers immediately entered, putting their own welfare at risk. The Westland Fire Department notified officers that the fire was located inside apartment 102 and the evacuation of the adjacent units needed to be conducted immediately. Officers found the door of apartment 101 to be locked, at which time they began knocking and yelling for the occupants to evacuate. The hallway began to fill with heavy smoke. Officers heard occupants yelling for help from inside apartment 101. Fighting through the smoke without any type of protective gear, Officers Gomez and Pettit forced open multiple apartment doors, alerting the residents to the extreme danger nearby. This video will give you a better idea of the danger that these officers were facing.
Police! Let's go! Go! Let's go!
Due to the fast actions of these officers, all the residents from this building were successfully evacuated without any injury. For the events of this night, Officer Gomez and Officer Pettit are hereby awarded the Westland Police Department Life Saving Award. I would now like to introduce Sergeant Jeff Kropotker.
I would like to call up Officer Trosper and Officer Aldini. In July, Westland Police Department received a frantic 911 call about a child drowning in a pool. Officers were quickly dispatched. While on the way to the home, they were advised that the family was attempting CPR, but they weren't sure if it was working. It was unknown by those on scene how long the child had been in the pool, unresponsive. Officer Trosper was the first to arrive on scene. He quickly assessed the child's condition and recognized that the child was in need of immediate first aid. It was determined that the child had no pulse and was not breathing. Officer Trosper swiftly began administering CPR to the 1-year-old child. Officer Aldini arrived on scene to assist. Knowing the severity of the circumstances, Officer Aldini quickly took over CPR of the 1-year-old. Officers were able to perform life-saving CPR and a pulse returned to the child. The 1-year-old child was ultimately transported to the hospital. Following up the incident with the mother of the victim, she advised that she was a registered nurse and was far too emotional to do CPR on her own child. The mother stated that due to the officers remaining calm under immense pressure and their immediate response, Officer Trosper and Aldini were the sole reason her son was alive today. She could not join us tonight, but wished to express her gratitude to the officers of the Westland Police Department. Because of their actions, saving the life of a 1-year-old child, Officer Trosper and Aldini are awarded Westland Police Department Life-Saving Awards. I would like to call up Police Service Aides Allison and Machiniak. There are many working parts to the Westland Police Department. Many of these are not readily visible to the public, but are essential to the functionality of the police department. The police service aide is one of those parts. These men and women are non-sworn personnel whose work focuses on prisoner care, but includes many other responsibilities that are critical to the efficient operation of the police department. On November 17th, 2019, PSAs Machiniak and Allison were working the afternoon shift, handling the many responsibilities that are tasked to them. The PSAs observed a prisoner via cell block camera seated on the floor with a blanket wrapped around his neck in an apparent effort to take his own life. The PSAs immediately took action, quickly entering the cell of the distressed prisoner, and upon entering, were able to remove the blanket from around his neck. After reviewing the video of the incident, it was determined that PSAs responded to the cell within 20 seconds of the prisoner wrapping the blanket around his neck. Due to their timely actions, of these two police service aides are awarded the Westland Police Department Commendation. Next, I'd like to call up Officers Teschendorf and Fernie. On May 7th, 2019, Officers Teschendorf and Fernie were assigned to the routine patrol. Officers conducted a traffic stop for a simple civil infraction in the area of Van Born and Henry Ruff. While officers approached the vehicle, the driver fled on foot. After a brief foot chase, the subject was apprehended by officers.
Hey, what's up, man? Hey! Street ready, we got one running. Thank you! I will take you! Cell phone, cameraman, Vanborn, the apartment complex. Black
male gray sweatshirt, black knit hat.
Do not move! Do not move! He's over there. Get him.
The driver lied about his name and was later identified as a 39-year-old male from Alabama who had outstanding warrants with the U.S. Marshals. The arrestee, who was in possession of a stolen handgun, 24 grams of crack, 14 grams of cocaine, 4.5 grams of fentanyl, and a large sum of cash. The subject had just been released from 14 years in federal prison. He was subsequently turned over to the U.S. Marshals and was charged federally on those charges. This is an example of excellent police work by these officers. Their efforts took a career criminal who was in possession of a firearm and substantial amount of potential lethal narcotics off the streets of Westland. Because of their exemplary job in this case, both officers, Teschendorf and Fernie, will be receiving Westland Police Department certificates of merit. Next, I'd like to introduce Officer Paris.
I'd like to call up Officer Ryan D'Amico. Domestic violence calls can be extremely dangerous to any police officer, especially when the weapon is involved. This was the case for responding officers on December 29th, 2019. At approximately 1:30 a.m., Westland officers were dispatched to a residence after a female victim called 911, stating her ex-boyfriend was attempting to break into her house. While en route to the location, dispatch updated responding officers stating that the suspect was kicking at her side door and possibly armed with a gun. The call quickly escalated when officers were advised that the suspect made entry into the house. Dispatch then advised officers that they had an open 911 line and heard someone say, "Put your hands up." Officer D'Amico arrived on scene and immediately went to the side door where he could hear male screaming at a female. Officer D'Amico observed the damaged door and began to enter the residence. At that time, the suspect ran out of the front of the home and fled on foot. Responding officers reported seeing the suspect holding something tight to his body near his right waistband as they gave chase. The victim later stated that the suspect placed a handgun to her head and made threats to kill her. The victim stated that she feared for her life. Officers momentarily lost sight of the suspect, but quickly found him running through the neighborhood. Responding officers quickly set up a perimeter in the area, and Officer D'Amico observed a red jacket underneath a parked SUV in the area. Officer D'Amico observed the suspect hiding under the vehicle and ordered him to show his hands and to crawl towards him, which he complied. Officer D'Amico was able to take the suspect into custody, however, the weapon was not recovered on his person. With the assistance of the Michigan State Police K-9 unit, officers were able to locate the weapon in the backyard of a nearby residence. During an interview with the Detective Bureau, the suspect admitted that he went to the victim's residence with thought of causing harm to her. Based on the due diligence of Officer D'Amico to take the suspect into custody, the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office authorized charges for first-degree home invasion, aggravated stalking, resisting obstructing police, and domestic violence second offense. Because of his actions, Officer D'Amico is presented with the Westland Police Department citation. I'd like to call up Officer Neville and Officer Rob Sherrick. Officers are taught to be on their guard and to always be aware of their surroundings at all times, and this was especially a true statement for Officer Sherrick and Officer Neville on July 14, 2019. At approximately 3 p.m., Officer Sherrick and Officer Neville were speaking to each other in separate patrol cars while in the parking lot of Voss Park near Henry Ruff and Palmer. During their conversation, Officer Sherrick briefly noticed a Chevy Equinox traveling south on Henry Ruff. As Officer Neville was speaking to Officer Sherrick, they heard a single, distinct sound of a gunshot. At that time, officers observed the Chevy Equinox now traveling an estimated 60 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. Although both officers believed that the occupants of the vehicle were trying to shoot at them, both officers took swift action and caught up to the vehicle. Officer Sherrick observed the vehicle swerving into oncoming traffic, and as they got closer, they observed the occupants frantically moving within the vehicle. Officer Sherrick and Officer Neville activated their emergency lights and initiated a traffic stop. Officers ordered the occupants to show their hands as they were removed from the vehicle. Upon contact with one of the occupants, they stated they were just throwing fireworks out the window. After officers ordered the 4 occupants out of the vehicle, Officer Neville located a 9mm handgun inside a purse belonging to the front passenger. During an interview with the Detective Bureau, the driver admitted to illegally obtaining the weapon and firing the gun while driving. Although it is not clear whether the driver was directly attempting to harm these officers, Officer Neville Schurig reacted without hesitation and took the driver and an illegal handgun off the street. The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office charged the driver with CCW, a 5-year felony, and reckless discharge of a firearm. Based on these officers' actions, Officer Neville and Officer Schurig are awarded the Westland Police Department citation. I'd like to call up Officer Broda, Officer Pleer, and Officer D'Amico. Social media can be a social tool for law enforcement. It can help identify those suspected of committing crimes or contain evidence of a crime, as was the case on December 11th, 2019. At 11:30 p.m., Officer Broda, Pleer, and D'Amico were dispatched to a residence regarding a threats complaint. The victim stated that three known acquaintances were threatening to come to their house and assault her. The victim advised officers that one of the suspects was on Facebook Live, stating that she was on the way to the victim's residence to shoot up the house. Officer D'Amico viewed the Facebook Live video and observed the suspects brandishing a silver and black handgun while sitting in the passenger seat of a vehicle. The suspect stated that she was ready to shoot somebody. The victim believed that the suspects would be arriving in a white Chevy Malibu. Officers advised the victim to stay in the house while officers positioned themselves down the street. A short time later, Officers D'Amico, Broda, and Pleer observed a white Chevy Malibu, followed by a Chevy Impala, slowly driving towards the victim's house. Officer Broda and Officer D'Amico stopped one of the vehicles while Officer Pleer stopped the other. The 3 suspects involved all stated that they were on the way to the victim's house to confront her over a Facebook feud. All 3 were arrested before they were able to carry out their threats. While searching one of the vehicles, officers located a silver and black handgun in the glove compartment, along with illegal prescription pills. During an interview with the Detective Bureau, 2 of the suspects admitted they were going to the victim's residence with the handgun to provide support for a 3rd suspect who was going to fight the victim. Based on this information, one of the suspects was charged with carrying a dangerous weapon with an unlawful intent, CCW, felony firearm, possession of a controlled substance. The second suspect was charged with carrying a dangerous weapon with unlawful intent, felony firearm, commission of a felony with a motor vehicle. The 3rd suspect was charged with threats. Due to these officers' investigative skills and patience, they were able to prevent a potential violent encounter. Because of this, Officer D'Amico, Officer Broda, and Officer Pleer are all awarded the Westland Police Department Unit Commendation.
May I please have up Officer Kozak and Sergeant Kapodra. On October 8th, 2019, officers were dispatched to a United States Marine who was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. He was armed with a gun and threatening suicide in his vehicle. Officers located the vehicle and requested the dispatch attempt phone contact with this individual. Dispatch was able to make contact, who said that he would only speak with Officer Kozak and then disconnected the call. Officer Kozak is a highly respected U.S. Marine and Purple Heart recipient. Officer Kozak is aware of the seriousness of post-traumatic stress disorder among service members and the emotional trauma all too many are forced to deal with. Officers on the scene notified Officer Kozak, who was off duty and at home with his family at the time of the incident. Kozak dropped what he was doing and immediately came in to help despite being off duty. Sergeant Kapodra, who was also off duty, responded as one of the police department's crisis negotiators. He was from a local restaurant where he was having dinner with his family. Officer Kozak spoke with the subject, who advised Officer Kozak that he had a gun in his lap and that he wanted to end his life. Officer Kozak spoke in depth with the subject for over 45 minutes. During the up and down conversation with the distraught subject, Officer Kozak needed assistance giving the man advice and direction, as he had no formal training as a negotiator. Due to the fact that the subject would only speak with Officer Kozak, Sergeant Kapodra took action by writing down things in a notebook for Officer Kozak to say to keep the subject alive and talking. Ultimately, he was able to persuade the subject to exit the vehicle without his weapon. Officer Kozak not only came in on his own time to assist a fellow Marine, convinced the subject to exit the vehicle without harming himself, and he also drove him to the hospital in a police vehicle so that he could get the help that he desperately needed. Because of this, Officer Kozak and Sergeant Capadra's devotion to assist this individual, a wife still has her husband, and children still have their father, and a U.S. Marine that has sacrificed so much for each of us still has his life. Because of their actions on this night, Officer Kozak and Sergeant Capadra will both be receiving the Westland Police Department Life Saving Award. Next, could I please have up Officer Jennifer Schurig, Officer Michael Steckley, Officer Jason Neville, and Officer Thomas Rogers. On a sunny day in September, Officers Schurig, Steckley, and Neville were dispatched to a residence for a possible drug overdose. Someone had called 911 and stated that they needed help, but they were unable to give their exact location or address to the 911 dispatcher. While officers were en route to the location, dispatch advised that the subject on the phone was no longer communicating with them, but that the line was still open. They could hear faint breathing. Dispatch was able to ping the cell phone to an area of Bancroft and Bannister in the Norwayne area. While on Bannister Court, officers began to speak with a resident of a group home that was known to officers to have many residents inside. That resident advised officers that everyone in the home was okay and that no one was calling 911. Time was working against the officers, and dispatch was still listening to the open line, trying to get any sort of response from the caller. Officer Schurig then had an idea. She began to drive around the neighborhood with her siren activated. While her siren was activated, she communicated with dispatch to see if the siren was getting louder or softer over the open 911 line. After about 3 minutes of driving around the neighborhood with the siren on, officers were back in the exact same area of Bannister Court. Dispatch could hear the siren loudest when officers were in front of the home that they had already checked. Officers again went and spoke with the resident and asked if they could check with the other residents inside the home. While checking the home, officers located a female unresponsive in the back bedroom. She was breathing but unconscious at the time. This video shows the extreme amount of effort that these officers dedicated towards locating this female in order to get her help.
Or could she be outside? Can the call taker hear my siren? Okay, firm, she can hear the siren right now.
Where was the siren greatest heard?
Siren was loudest in the area of Bannister and Bancroft near the corner. I'm gonna hit it again and let's just make sure we're still hearing it.
Alright, we're gonna be pounding on some windows. Please have her listen.
Now that the officers had located the female, they wasted no time in summoning the Westland Fire Department to the scene where they immediately began medical treatment. The female did not suffer any long-term negative health consequences due to this event, but she would have if these officers had not shown such a high level of dedication to locate a person in need. Due to their dedication to locate a resident in need of medical attention and not giving up until they located her, these officers are awarded a Westland Police Department Unit Commendation.
I'd like to call up Officer Pettit and Sergeant Reardon. On July 10th, 2019, Officer Pettit and Sergeant Reardon were dispatched to one of the worst types of calls an officer could get: a 2-month-old baby not breathing. When officers arrived at the location, they observed the lifeless baby lying on the living room floor. You can only imagine how panicked the parents were at this time. The parents were attempting to do CPR on the baby, but were unsuccessful. Officers immediately took action and took over CPR on the baby, who was still not breathing. Both officers administered life-saving CPR until the ambulance arrived on scene and transported the baby to the hospital. Officers conducted their follow-up investigation at the hospital. Officers spoke with the attending physician, who advised that if it were not for their efforts of these two responding officers, that child would not have survived. Both having young children of their own, they remained calm, relied on their training, and saved a 2-month-old baby. For their actions, Officer Pettit and Sergeant Reardon are awarded the Westland Police Department Life-Saving Awards. Next, I'd like to call up Officer Trosper, Officers Johns and Solier. On July 29th, 2019, officers were dispatched to a residential fire. Officers were advised while en route that the residents at the location are elderly and were still inside the home. As officers arrived on scene, the home was fully engulfed in flames. Flames were coming out of the front windows of the home. Officers quickly ran to the rear of the home to see if they could make contact with the residents still inside. Thick black smoke was emanating from the door wall that led into the kitchen. Officer John illuminated the interior of the home with his flashlight through the thick, dark smoke. Inside, officers could see the silhouette of an elderly female crawling on the floor, attempting to get to the door wall. Officers were yelling to her to get her to come to the sound of their voice. The elderly female was unable to muster enough energy to make it to the door, and she collapsed into the smoky darkness. Officer Trosper noticed this and crawled on his hands and knees into the fully engulfed home. Through the dark smoke, wearing no protective gear, he grabbed a hold of the female victim. Officer Johns and Officer Solier reached in and took a hold of Officer Trosper's legs and pulled him out of the residence. Officer Trosper successfully pulled the female victim from the residence to the safety outside. Officer Trosper was treated for smoke inhalation and cuts to his hand received from the broken glass on the floor. You can see exactly what happened here.
There's one male and one female that registers well.
Keep coming, keep coming. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, Mike, keep coming. Come on. Oh, God. Right here. Where's she at? She's right here. Can you get in? Get her? Where's she at? Right there, inside. Right there. Hold on, my leg. Pull me out, pull me out. Get her out. Get her out. Get her out. I don't know. Go to the front. Fuck out of here. Hey, everyone go to the front, man. It's we can't do nothing back here now.
The heroic life-saving actions taken by Officer Trosper on this day is the reason tonight he is awarded the Westland Police Department Life-Saving Award. For their assistance in the critical incident, Officer Johns and Solier are awarded Westland Police Department Unit Commendations.
I'd like to call up Sergeant Humphrey, Officer D'Amico, Officer Schurig, and Sergeant Little. Many crimes are solved due to a collaborated effort by patrol officers at the scene and the detectives conducting follow-up. At times, these cases cannot be solved until additional evidence is located and suspects are identified. This was especially true for the officers who were investigating. The investigation lasted nearly 10 months. On October of 2018, Sergeant Little, Officer Schurig, and Officer D'Amico were dispatched to an apartment complex regarding an armed robbery. The victim called 911, stated he was robbed by the suspect and struck on the back of the head. As the victim was walking to his residence, he heard footsteps behind him and felt a sudden impact on the back of his head, causing a laceration. The victim fell to the ground and observed the suspect straddling over him. The suspect began striking the victim in the head and stated, "Give me your money, give me your phone." The victim attempted to fight back and felt a solid object on the suspect's right hand during the struggle. After calling 911, the victim and his brother went back to the scene of the assault and observed a black handgun slide on the ground where he was struggling with the suspect. The handgun slide was taken into evidence and preserved for possible DNA evidence. Officers checked the area for the suspect and for video evidence, but were unsuccessful. The case was then turned over to Sergeant Humphrey of the Detective Bureau. His thorough investigation included interviewing the victim and his brother, collecting their DNA for elimination purposes, driving to the scene of the crime with the victim, and checking 4 different locations for video evidence. After exhausting all their means of identifying a suspect, the only lead left was possible DNA on the evidence found at the scene. Sergeant Humphrey submitted the gun slide to the Michigan State Police Crime Lab to be examined. In June of 2019, the Michigan State Police identified a possible suspect. It was discovered that the identified suspect was currently located in a correctional facility for unrelated charges and eventually brought back to the Westland Police Department regarding this incident. The suspect was interviewed and originally denied involvement in the case. He later admitted to following the victim to his residence after a traffic altercation, attacking the victim and striking him in the back of the head. Based on the entire investigation, the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office authorized warrants for armed robbery, assault with intent to rob while armed, felonious assault, and felony firearm in July of 2019. Due to the outstanding police work of the officers at the scene, Sergeant Little, Officer D'Amico, and Officer Sherg are awarded the Westland Police Department Unit Commendation. Due to the diligent follow-up and investigation by Sergeant Humphrey, he is awarded the Westland Police Department Certificate of Merit. I'd like to call up Officer Neville. In May of 2019, Officer Neville received information about an unknown suspect being involved in several serious crimes around the area, including a B&E of a garage out of the city of Wayne, 2 home invasions in the city of Taylor, and a larceny in Westland. All these investigations revealed that they had one thing in common, which was a stolen Ford Edge out of Redford. On May 31, 2019, at approximately 11:50 a.m., Officer Neville was on routine patrol in the area of Van Born and Merriman when he observed the stolen Ford Edge in question driving in the area. Prior to Officer Neville being able to make any police action, the vehicle fled the area at a high rate of speed. Officer Neville activated his emergency lights and sirens, and the suspect refused to stop. The pursuit entered a residential area of the city of Wayne, where the vehicle eventually came to a stop. A male driver and a female passenger both fled on foot, and Officer Neville gave chase after the driver. With the assistance of responding officers, the suspect was located hiding in a nearby garage. Officer Neville was able to arrest the suspect without incident. While searching the stolen vehicle, Officer Neville located several numerous items that were found stolen from the various crimes associated with the home invasion and larceny offenses. During an interview with the Detective Bureau, the suspect stated he fled from police because he had an active parole absconder warrant while driving a stolen vehicle. Due to Officer Neville's outstanding police work, the suspect was charged by the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office for fleeing and eluding, receiving and concealing stolen property, and being a 4-time habitual offender. Incidents like this are not uncommon for Officer Neville. Due to his dedication to the job and attention to detail, Officer Neville is presented with the Westland Police Department Certificate of Merit.
I please have Officer Richardson, Officer Broda, and Officer Strohauer. Officers have a unique job in that they respond to a wide varieties of calls for service, and no 2 calls for service are ever hardly the same. It's important for officers to be prepared to take action during even the most unusual types of calls. On January 16th of this year, during the late night hours, officers received a 911 call from a man who had been trapped underneath the Dodge Ram he was servicing in the lot of National Tree Service. The front driver's side tire of the vehicle was atop of the victim's lower body groin area. The vehicle somehow shifted into gear as the victim was working underneath it. Officer Richard arrived on scene and observed the victim completely trapped by the tire of the truck. He immediately realized the severity of the situation and wasted no time in locating a jack in the rear of an unlocked trailer. Officer Richardson utilized the jack to lift one side of the truck up, and he was able to secure that side of the truck before lifting the same with the jack. This removed the pressure from the tire on the victim's body. Once the truck was completely lifted, Officer Broda and Strohauer were able to pull the victim safely from beneath the car and keep him calm until rescue arrived on scene. Take a look at this video to see how quickly these officers reacted to solve the situation.
Hey, partner. Hey, we got an ambulance on the way, okay?
Hey, I got a...
You want to shut the car off?
I got a jack.
Okay, we got an ambulance on the way, okay?
Hey.
What's your first name, partner? Stay with me.
Alert and tough. Even in the front driver wheel.
Get me out.
Hold it there until I get.
See if you can pull him out, Jake. Need a log underneath that?
No, I should be able to. You'll be able to get him now.
I know. I know. All right, got him. All right, stay right here. We got the ambulance here.
What's your name, partner?
Officers Broda and Strohauer provided valuable assistance to Officer Richard, who showed quick thinking and saved this victim's life and limbs. For this reason, Officers Broda and Strohauer will be receiving departmental citations, and Officer Richardson will be receiving the Westland Police Department Life Saving Award. I'd now like to invite up Deputy Chief Randy Theveridge.
Good evening. I'd like to bring up Officer Derek Trosper. He might be out with the dog. Tonight, not only are we recognizing the men and women of the Westland Police Department, we're also recognizing one of our canines, Canine Narco. The Westland Police Department canine program started in 1997, and since that time there have been 5 different handlers and 7 different canines. Narco started with the Westland Police Department in October 2012 when he was 10-month-old and served for over 7 years on patrol with Officer Trosper. Officer Trosper and Narco completed their training through the Canine ATF and also received certification from the National Association of Professional Canine Handlers. Narco worked as a multi-purpose canine being utilized in areas such as narcotics, human trafficking, area searches, building searches, evidence searches, and handler protection. During this time on patrol, Narco had over 2,000 uses, which has included narcotic seizures and apprehensions of criminals and tracking and area searches. Narco assisted in many arrests where criminals were brought to justice and undoubtedly kept off our streets and keeping our community safe. Narco also conducted canine demonstrations, school visits, and made appearances at many community events. In 2016, Narco was recognized by the Westland Police Department and given an award for tracking a carjacking suspect. Due to Narco's tracking ability, the suspect was located but attempted to flee on foot. Narco was deployed and the suspect was successfully taken into custody. Narco has also conducted many evidence searches during his time on patrol, where he's located firearms on 4 separate occasions that were discarded by criminals. There are just a few cases where Narco was able to assist the Westland Police Department and his fellow officers and his community. Narco is now 8 years old, and the time has come for his retirement. Narco will live out his retirement with Officer Trosper and their family. We would now like to recognize... We'd like to recognize K-9 Narco for his years of service to the Westland Police Department. Retirement's exciting for him, I guess. Now I'd like to call up Deputy Chief Miller to the podium.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Theveridge. I think everybody will agree with the emotional ups and downs of the ceremony tonight. You're going to find that this next award is very fitting. I'd like to call up Sergeant Joe Reardon. So anyone who's been on a commercial flight has heard the pre-flight safety instructions, where they always tell you that in case of an emergency and oxygen masks are deployed, to make sure you to put your own on before you attempt to put on anybody else's. For too many years, law enforcement, we have been putting on everybody else's oxygen mask without ever getting around to putting on our own. Many cities, including Westland, have had employee assistance programs for many years. Although well-intentioned, the reality is that police officers are not likely to proactively ask for help, especially when the person they're going to speak to is not familiar with law enforcement culture. In 2019, Sergeant Reardon decided to do something about this and approach the administration. He has to be put in charge of developing what is known as a critical incident and peer support team for the Westland Police Department. The administration was 100% behind the idea, and we were 100% confident that Joe was the man to lead this team and make it a success. Critical incident and peer support teams consist of police officers who are specially trained over a 5-day period to recognize signs of stress and conduct critical incident stress debriefings. They also learn a host of other skills that help them provide assistance to officers who may be struggling personally or just need to talk to somebody about an emotionally draining run. It is the hope of critical incident and peer support that being proactive will increase the likelihood that officers who may need assistance will be identified sooner, and the fact that the person speaking to them will be one of their peers, that the likelihood that they will actually accept that assistance. A critical component of critical incident and peer support is confidentiality. This was addressed by Governor Snyder in 2016 when he signed the First Responders Privileged Communication Bill. This bill allows for those conversations that are conducted in a critical incident or peer support capacity to be protected by the law, much like a doctor and client or a doctor and patient have confidentiality. So in 2019, Sergeant Reardon developed a leadership team which consisted of Sergeant Mike Little and Officer Mike Steckley. Over the course of the year, Sergeant Reardon and his leadership team put together a group of 12 officers from our department who would eventually become the Westland First Responders Critical Incident and Peer Support Team. Sergeant Reardon and his leadership team arranged for the required week-long training session to be hosted by the City of Westland right here at City Hall. This training not only allowed our officers to be trained and certified critical incident and peer support, but also allowed more than 30 other officers and private citizens from all over the state to be certified and bring valuable skills back to their own cities. In October of 2019, the Westland First Responders Critical Incident and Peer Support Team was officially recognized by the Michigan Crisis Response Association. And since then, has already proven to be a valuable resource to our department and its employees. Sergeant Reardon, on behalf of Chief Jed Ruzick and the officers of the Westland Police Department and their families, we would like to thank you for your efforts to improve the well-being of our first responders and congratulate you on receiving the Chief's Coin Award.
Thank you. So for the final award of the night, I'd like to invite up Officer Jason Neville to join me up here on the stage. At the end of each year, we review the accomplishments of all of our police officers. To us, an accomplishment is not just numbers, but consistent productivity, quality police work, professionalism, a proactive work ethic, dedication to the city, and even compassion. The Westland Police Officer of the Year distinguishes himself by actions throughout the entire year. These actions far exceed the duty requirements expected of his position, both on duty and off duty. In 2019, as you can see tonight, we had many examples of great police work and many actions of heroism. There were several officers that were probably pretty well deserving of such an honor, but even though it was a tough decision, we feel that one single police officer distinguished himself above all others. For his accomplishments, we have selected Jason Neville to be the 2019 Westland Police Officer of the Year, and here are some of the reasons why. Officer Neville is a proactive and productive police officer. He's a true leader who continues to represent us all well. Prior to Westland, Officer Neville worked for the Detroit Police Department for 5 years. There he worked Patrol Division, he worked Traffic Division, and he also worked Special Operations. In Detroit, Officer Neville was presented with a number of awards, including the 2009 Detroit Police Officer of the Year Award. Officer Neville was also provided with a department citation for bravery after being shot in the line of duty. He's now been with the Westland Police Department for 5 years, and he's worked the Patrol Division, and he's also worked our Special Investigations Unit. In 2019, Officer Neville began the year working with our Special Investigations Unit. There he was a part of a team that investigated major crimes, narcotic-related offenses. In May, Officer Neville transferred back to the Patrol Division. This is where Officer Neville's true work ethic shines on a daily basis. From May until December, Officer Neville made 100 arrests. Of those arrests, 52 of them were felony arrests, 48 of them were misdemeanor arrests. Many of those felony arrests resulted in the seizure of illegal guns, felony narcotics, and stolen vehicles. In that period of time, he also made 15 drunk driving arrests, and he made 884 traffic stops. Beyond police work, there's a personal element that goes along with this award also. Jason always brings a positive attitude to his job every day, which motivates and engages the other officers on his shift to be engaged with their job. He's an experienced police officer who's certainly a true leader amongst the ranks. He's enjoyable to be around with his easygoing personality and his demeanor. And lastly, and most important, he's proud to be a Westland police officer. So at this time, I'm proud to present Officer Jason Neville as the 2019 Police Officer of the Year. Jason, why don't you take a second and introduce your family and say a couple words if you don't mind?
Okay. Just real short tonight. Tonight I have my wife Laura. She's back there in the back. She's kind of watching Harper, who's the loud one. You guys can hear it all night. Brooklyn's here in the front, and then my oldest daughter, unfortunately, she's at a dance event tonight, so she's not here. But as you can see, there's a lot of people that are worthy of getting this award tonight. A lot of the officers I work alongside of, they're great to work with, and as you can see by all the videos and all the awards and everything given tonight, it's a team effort. Everybody works great together. So I'd just like to thank the chief, the awards board, my family, and all the other officers that I work with. Thank you.
Well, as we get ready to close the night, I want to leave everyone with a couple of final words and a couple of final thoughts. You know, we stood up here tonight and we recognized many acts of heroism, great police work, but what sometimes seems to get overlooked is the simple day-to-day public service and duties and crime deterrent measures that these police officers they perform on a daily basis. Last year, the FBI released the most recent state of Michigan crime statistics. The city of Westland has continued to see a downward trend in both property crime and violent crime. We've had most significant drops in robberies, aggravated assaults, burglaries, larcenies, and motor vehicle thefts. Violent crime and property crime in the city of Westland is at the lowest level it's been in the past 10 years. This is a direct result of two things. Number one, it's the proactive measures taken by all these men and women of the Westland Police Department and the Patrol Division every day while they're out there. Number two, it's the diligent manner in which our investigative bureaus, both our Special Investigations and our Detective Bureau, do on a daily basis to follow up on crime. As a result, I've said this before, I believe criminals now just feel that it's smarter to commit crimes in other cities outside of Westland. It's no doubt that it's a difficult time to be a police officer. These men and women are doing the most dangerous job in the world at probably one of the most dangerous times to do it. Despite the daily dangers, despite the stress on their bodies, despite the negative criticism, these officers put on that uniform every day with pride to serve the city of Westland. And one of the things that I think is most important that people really need to kind of keep in the back of their mind is they leave their families at home to come to the city of Westland to protect your families, and that's a huge thing to think about. So beyond all the awards given today, I want to take a quick second to thank all the Westland police officers. I want to thank the Westland Police Service aides and all the staff of the Westland Police Department, because basically we're a team that works together. And with the dedication of all of you guys, and I want to thank you all for your dedication that helps keep Westland a safe place to live, work, and raise families. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone, and then I'm going to turn this over to Lieutenant Wilkie to let him finish out the evening. So thank you.
Okay. For those of you who know me, you know that I'm a no-nonsense lieutenant, and I want to talk to everybody here about silliness on the job and taking it seriously. As you've worked with me, you realize that I don't play games and that we all need to take things extremely seriously, okay? I see that things may be heading towards a silly trend, and I want to... What's going on? It's overriding the signal. What are you...
Well, what have we here? Hey, hi, this is Rabbit from the Vermont Highway Patrol, and I have taken over your award ceremony to say a few words. Troopers Ramathorn, Foster, Mack, and Farva wanted to be here, but they had to take an unexpected trip down south of the border to Mexico and left me behind because, well, I'm the stupid rookie. What can I say? But hey, the entire post wanted to say a few things, right, meow? And first being, thank you to all those attendants that came out to cheer on your family and friends from the Westland Police Department. I think it's fair to say that all of us in law enforcement could definitely use your support, and we appreciate you coming out and showing your love, so thank you for that. And second, I would like to congratulate all of the award winners. Now, you went above and beyond, doing everything from saving lives to catching people who were littering and smoking the... Wait, you guys can do that in Michigan now. Never mind. All right, hey, well, great work anyway. And lastly, I wanted to congratulate Officer Neville on winning the Police Officer of the Year award. That's awesome. I mean, you just crushed it in 2019, and I'll tell you what, if you ever want to come work for the Vermont Highway Patrol, I mean, we would trade Farva in a heartbeat for you. Just let me know. Congratulations on your well-deserved award. Now, I think you all deserve a night out. Now, maybe we should go to that bar. What's it called? Shenanigans? Yeah, maybe chug some maple syrup, get a liter of cola, find some bears, have a blast. But hey, just make sure you don't take it too far. You know what? Otherwise, you're going to start looking like Farva in an open bar. You don't want that, trust me. Well, I guess it looks like Lieutenant Wilkie is signaling for me to wrap this up. So, well, on behalf of the Vermont Highway Patrol and the Westland Police Department Awards Committee, yeah, we want to thank you so much for coming out. And we'll see you next year. All right, over and out. Yeah.
That was Mr. Eric Stolahansky from Super Troopers who was kind enough to do that for us. So I want to say thank you to him, and I want to say thank you to everybody else here who helped out today, our cable department, our IT department who worked closely with us, the awards committee, and mostly all these officers. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great night. That is the show. We'll see you next year. Thank you.